LinkedIn, all that sort of stuff. And it looks great to know what's going on with the company and show that you're up to date and that you actually care about it. And then the next thing you want to look at is the company's culture, mission, and values. And this you can typically also find on the website. They usually have like a written section about their mission and values and things like that. And it's important for job seekers to see that you have a good fit with their culture and that you will fit in with the workplace and you value the same stuff. And then the next thing you want to look at is the client's products and services. So you can usually find this on the company's websites, blogs, case studies, social media sites, and all that sort of stuff to see what the company typically produces and what you'll be doing if you're hired at the company. And then the last thing you want to look at is the person interviewing you. So usually when you get like an email or a phone call saying that you got an interview, it'll have a person's name and contact information. So you can do a little investigating, Google that person's name, check out their LinkedIn, and try to find some stuff that you might have in common that you can start a conversation with during the interview. And that can be super helpful.
Okay, so with that background research, you have to make sure that the company's values, mission, and just the general company activity and practice fits with your own. Because ultimately, you are determining whether or not that company fits with you just as much as they are determining how much you fit with them, right? So that has to be really important. And so with that, you can also, I highly recommend looking into their dress code and their general office workplace culture, right? Is it business casual? Is it just regular cash, right? Does the feminine style have to be right at the knees, the skirt, if you wear skirts, right? Or does the cut have to be a certain way? And how does that fit with your own ideas of yourself? And if you're okay with getting up every day, and if it's business formal, are you okay with wearing a full suit, right? So again, you have to make sure because some are more strict and rigid than others. And then because a dress code is kind of an expectation, you have to be okay with that. And that goes along with just in general, the workplace and the work job description, you have to be okay with whatever you're going to be doing, right? And then also you should know that it's okay if you decide to work against working or taking a job at any time during this process. If you like say initially, hey, this is kind of a cool job, I want to look into it, and you look into it and you say, ooh, this is problematic for me, or maybe like you see something that you don't like, be okay with saying, nope, never mind. And then even if you get an interview, and I'll get to this later, but if something happens in the interview and you're done, don't be afraid to say, I'm done and I need to leave, and do it gracefully than that. But be okay with that, right? No, anytime during this process, be okay with just not being into it, right? Like I said, you gotta know what you're getting yourself into. That's all part of background research. And also, you should know that this is a lot of information to research, especially like looking at it on the face value, but you don't have to be an expert at the job to look like you're qualified and to look like you care about being there. The important part is being okay with asking questions. And it probably is even encouraged. You might even be asked later, which we're going to get to in a second. Do you have any questions for us, right? And that's part of the process. So yeah. Okay, so finally, we're going to get into some interview attire, right? So some general guidelines, like I alluded to earlier, is to know your audience, right? Know the workplace culture, know what you're actually applying for. You got to dress like you belong in the job, right? And then if they have a specific dress code, wear that dress code, right? Sometimes people even recommend dressing like a level above a fanciness level, right? That's up to your own personal preference, but it is, I would say it's always better to be overdressed than underdressed. Also, you got to remember that first impressions aren't everything, but they are important, right? So your appearance shows your commitment and effort in doing your best, ultimately. And whether it's erroneous or not, it shows to the employers who don't know you yet that you care and you want to be there, right? So the general rules: shower, brush your hair, wear deodorant, present yourself in a way that you would to people who you want to pay attention to you and want to, yeah. So this could mean light makeup and hair for people who are into that, right? Also, it could just mean combing your hair and wearing some wax, whatever you feel shows that effort in you. And then, but always you have to do this, that make sure that whatever you're doing makes you happy and confident. Because if you're not in there confident, if you feel like whatever you look like just isn't you, they're gonna see that and it's gonna bring out everything else, right? So another way you can do that is to iron or steam your clothes. A really good tip for this is not everybody has an iron or a steamer, right? Take a spray bottle with water and spray your clothes down and hang them overnight. And they're pretty much wrinkle free. So that's a really good tip as well. Yeah, so you got to dress like in a way that makes you feel confident and motivated to be productive. But also you have to be comfortable, just maybe a little bit more professional than you might dress normally. And also just a note on comfort, make sure whatever you're wearing fits you correctly, because there's nothing more embarrassing than when you have to adjust things. And you know what I mean? Because it shows that you're distracted, right? And it's distracting for the interviewer. So make sure whatever you're wearing is comfortable and you're not going to fidget with it. So, right, I kind of already said that. To get more specifically with dressing like you belong, if there's a uniform, find out what color it is and wear that color, right? I want to be a clinical psychologist, so I'm going to wear a white blazer to the interview, right? Because I want to wear a white coat eventually, right? That's just one idea. I had a teacher who applied to be like she was a secretary in a police, like a police building, basically. Their uniforms are blue, so she wore blue to the interview, right? And like I said, if you feel like it, dress a level or two above the normal dress code. So with the nitty gritty of finding an interview attire outfit, good basic pieces go a long way. So you got to think clean, timeless lines and silhouettes, right? So you can think blazers, vests, cardigans and button-ups, lace to an extent. You know, you don't want things to look like lingerie, which I saw somewhere. Just, you know, within normal bounds, right? And then also tie neck blouses. I don't have a tie neck blouse today. But button-ups and button-downs are great for all different styles. Also, just a note on this, tuck in your shirts. Just a weird thing that society thinks you somehow look more put together, but it works. Tuck in your shirts as a general rule. Yeah, so then you can also look at V-length skirts, wide tailored length pants, and just normal dress pants that go with that, right? Yeah. Also look into dress shoes, flats, and pumps. But also, this is a cool thing. Don't be afraid to use like accent colors, which is kind of funny. So like if you have a full outfit like this, one way that I can make this super like show my personality or whatever is to wear red shoes or to wear some red accent earrings, right? And more masculine styles can do the same thing. They can wear a more colored like undershirt if they're wearing a jacket. They can wear pocket squares. They can wear cufflinks. Any little accents that you feel show who you are and show your personality. Don't be afraid to do that, right? So also a great way to show your personality is to wear a fun tie, right? Or to wear scarves and statement necklaces, like I said, watches and earrings. And for all of this, thrift stores are fantastic. I literally have 10 blazers that I all bought at thrift stores, and I never spent more than $15 on them. So if you need stuff, please go to thrift stores. Also, campus, which I think we're going to get to later more specifically, there is a campus professional closet that you can go to. It's not quite set up yet, but they have it running, and they have tons of different sizes, and you can go and say, hey, I need an outfit for an interview, and they can help you get that, and it's all for free. So pretty cool. Also, this is probably should be common knowledge, but wear the appropriate undergarments, please. You know, don't wear things that are too tight. Don't wear things that are going to ride up or fall down or show through. You know what I mean? This is all part of being modest. I want to put in quotes. But yeah, so that's wear the appropriate undergarments that you're not going to be fidgeting with and being uncomfortable. And like I've said a couple times, your outfit should show who you are, but shouldn't be the only thing that the interviewers notice, right? So a good idea is to be, in general, modest in the cut, fit, and pattern of everything, right? So yeah.
So some people can get nervous or stressed out during interviews, before interviews as well. And there are strategies you can use to feel less stressed out and just cope with those feelings a bit more effectively than you might already usually cope with them. So one way you can help yourself feel more relaxed during the interview is to just practice responding to example questions ahead of time. There's several ways you can do that. So some people will feel comfortable doing this in front of a mirror. Other people might prefer not to look in the mirror and maybe just be alone by themselves practicing, and just being aware of your body language and your facial expressions is really helpful for practicing for interviews. Also, your hand gestures is something to be mindful of. And you can also participate in mock interviews, which is what we're going to have available for you today. So that also helps a lot. Also, you can plan ahead and to be mindful of the caffeine that you consume the day of, because that can energize you, but it can also make you feel a lot more anxious or get your heart racing. So you might want to consider limiting how much caffeine you drink the day of the interview. And you would also benefit from planning how you're going to get to the interview, making sure you have plenty of time so that you can get there, even if you encounter any obstacles, get there stress-free, and already feel confident and comfortable with how you're going to get there. So that's one less thing to feel nervous about. Other ways to cope with anxiety for interviews are to sort of consider being aware of how you think about things and trying to move that in a healthier direction. So one way you can do that is to try to consider, like, if you're feeling really energized, like you might think you're really nervous. But another way to think about that is that you're just excited because you're probably really passionate about this job, and you can think about it that way and just remember how excited you are at the possibilities that could lie ahead for you in this field. And you can also try to just think about the experience as an opportunity to challenge yourself and improve your interview skills, and not see it as like something that's threatening, because ultimately it shouldn't be something that's going to harm you. So if you try to think about it that way, you can remember you're safe, it's not harmful experience, and you can learn a lot from it. And you can also use physical activity to relax that morning, and you can do this in whatever way you feel comfortable. So it can be really simple, just going for a walk or stretching or just moving your body at all, like, can really help just relax and slow down your heart rate. And you can also do this with relaxation techniques, which people often recommend meditation for, and I definitely recommend that, but not everyone's comfortable with meditation. So there's other ways to get similar benefits as to what you would get from meditating. And one way is to just simply become more aware of your breath more regularly. Try to make that kind of a habit to notice, like, the pace you're breathing at, maybe slow down the pace you're breathing at. And you can also listen to music, write in a journal. There's lots of ways that people can sort of relax in addition to meditating. And positive affirmations can be helpful as well. Some people really like using positive affirmations, and just maybe they like to look in the mirror and say something like, I am capable of this, I'm worthy of an amazing job. And that's really helpful. Some people might find that a bit cheesy, and I think that's acceptable if you feel that way. You know, you can try to change that, but it's not necessary, because there's other ways to sort of do positive affirmations without doing it in front of the mirror and saying it like that. You can just make an effort to become aware of, like, what your strengths are, and just think about those more often to improve your confidence, and just know that you deserve a good job, and that you do have a lot to offer as well. So you can just try to think about that. You could also make a list of, like, here's all the reasons I deserve a good job, or just here's all the things I like about myself. So becoming more aware of, like, the things that you do like about yourself, or the things that you know you're good at in terms of the position you're seeking, can be really helpful for soothing your nerves.
All right, now we're going to talk about some campus resources that can help you prepare for interviews and get you on the right foot. So the first one is the clothing closet that we have here on campus that Miranda mentioned earlier. And it's not currently open due to COVID. They're switching locations, but it's going to be open soon. So we'll be hearing information. You can always reach out to them. Their website is just ACAC something. But this is a really awesome place. I went there when they were open before COVID, and they have tons of free professional clothes and shoes available for students for job interviews, starting a job, things like that. And they're all donated by faculty and people in the community. They have all sorts of sizes. They have shoes, purses, jewelry, really anything that you could need. And it's a really great resource that we have. And then another one is Humboldt Handshake. So this is the website that you can easily search for campus jobs, internships, summer jobs, work study, and community service. And it's super nice because you can narrow it down by I qualify for work study, or I only want to do part-time, or if you're graduate student, undergraduate student, all those sorts of things. And you can really find some awesome stuff on there. And you can also register for workshops and special events. And then the last one is academic and career advisors. So that's who we're going to be hearing from today. But you can make an individual appointment with the appointments to help with four-year plans, full-time job searches, part-time job searches. You can work on your resume and cover letters, volunteer opportunities, grad school applications, changing your major, and all sorts of other stuff. So it's a great resource to check out. Do you guys have any questions on the first part of that? People on Zoom as well.
I just have a question regarding for people. Are they able to see this? Are you going to send the slides afterwards?
Yeah, it's sharing the screen so they see.
Oh,
that way.
perfect. Yeah, I was concerned. I was like,
Yeah.
wow.
No, we couldn't get both the TVs to work to like show it all. So.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Thank you.
Actually, I do have one other question.
Yeah.
You did say that they're not operating right now, but you can still use the ACAC.
They're closed right now, so you can't use it right now, but they're moving to like the library, I think, so they should be open within the next few months.
I have a little bit more to answer about that. I work with the Academic and Career Advising Center, so I'm one of their career advisors. So we already actually are moved to the library. We're operating from the library already. So we are meeting with students currently. In regards to the clothing closet, we're trying to figure out how to navigate, as you had mentioned, COVID, because there are certain regulations that now have to be taken in terms of like, sanitizing the clothing, like taking precautions with the donations. So we actually just talked about that this Monday in our career huddle, that we're trying to figure out where and when we're going to start it. I mean, it's going to be in the library where we're at. We are just still not really sure how to make sure that we follow and keep the students safe and also get it open.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much for clarifying that.
Does like colored hair, does that affect like your sort of presence in interviews? Like if you have
Yeah.
crazy color.
I know what you're saying. Personally, I think it depends on the job and the field you're going for. I think that it's totally fine, and we're coming up in a new age where like that's acceptable, tattoos are acceptable, and piercings and all of that. But some people might have a more professional dress code, so I would definitely just check with the company first before interviewing and see if they're going to make you dye your hair if you get a job there and that sort of thing. But yeah, I don't know what you guys think.
Yeah, and the same goes for like tattoos and things like that. Some dress codes require you to cover up, some don't. I know that most hospitals require them that they're covered up. Also, the other thing to note is that if you go to an interview with quote normal hair, and then you were like, oh, but next week I want to dye my hair fluorescent blue, that might be a little jarring for people. So you should keep that in mind, that if they already accept you with a different type of hair, you should at least confirm that it's okay for the dress code if you did have that and make that change. So just be aware of like big changes after they've already made a decision, I would say more. But yeah, I agree that it's definitely coming up more, so you should be fine. But
It definitely depends on the industry too.
Yeah,
Like if you're in
exactly.
hospitality, that's totally awesome. If you're in something super professional, like doctors or something, they might not like that. So yeah, just depends.
I would like to note, I do think it's changing a lot. I had a high school teacher who had tattoos like all over his arms and legs, like covered. So I'm optimistic about that
Yeah.
being less uptight in the future.
I also know too, like I work in a pharmacy and my pharmacists have been like in the industry for like how many decades, and even they said like when they were hired, like having colored hair and tattoos would basically get you not hired. But now they will, he had someone interview with him, like an intern, and he's like, oh, well, will it affect the way you do your job? No. And so That is true, even
Yeah.
though sometimes people still don't see it that way, but.
So just for those on Zoom, I don't know if you could hear that, but someone just shared that you said in the pharmacy,
Yeah.
they used to not be as accepting, but then you know someone who had colored hair, right?
Yeah, so like even in the medical field, it's changing.
Yeah.
So even in the medical field, she knows someone who had colored hair and was able to get a job. So that's good. And Benny also says the landscape for what is perceived as professional is different post-COVID. And there's much more empathy now for tattoos or hair. That's good to hear. Thank you, Benny. Yeah. So we can continue. And we'll have another Q&A after the presentation, but this is just to check in.
So now we're gonna move on to a little section about during the interview. Okay, so before we start that though, I did want to bring this to attention. So any questions regarding age, your genetic information, your birthplace, your country of origin, your citizenship, your disability status, your gender, your sexual orientation, your marital status, your family, pregnancy or planned pregnancy, your race, your color, your ethnicity, your religion, or really anything that you're not comfortable answering or are unsure why the answer is relevant, may be illegal or at the very least inappropriate. So there are several ways you can approach this if you do happen to get a question like this. You can choose to answer if you are comfortable, like if you think it's more of just trying to get to know you, like they're like, hey, where are you from, right? That's probably more of a camaraderie trying to get to know you situation. But if it's something more along the lines of another category, right? You can choose to deflect it. So you can say like, I promise my personal life will not interfere with my professional duties, right? That's a deflection. Or you can just choose not to answer, right? You can say, I don't feel comfortable answering that question, or I don't need to answer that question. That's not relevant, right? And then also if it's, I wouldn't say insulting, but if it feels like a true violation, you can 100% excuse yourself for the interview if you don't feel like you need to proceed with that. So those are some different options. Also, I did want to note that government jobs may ask for some of this information for census data or affirmative action programs, but you always have the option to not answer those questions. And then also, oh yeah, that's fine. It's cool. So then now, these are some questions that you might be asked, right? And there's a whole list of them, but basically any questions regarding who you are, what you did previously, what are your strengths and weaknesses, your future plans, how you manage certain pressures, and then like anything interesting you've worked on, how do your values fit with the company? All of those are pretty much like, they're just,
Standard.
yeah, they're standard, thank you. They're very standard for any kind of interview like that. And they're gonna vary also. If it's a very specific job, they might ask you very specific things about that job or about your skills regarding that. Like, how do you feel about doing this? How do you feel about working with Office 365? Or how do you feel about anything like that, that is a specific skill that also can be in the interview as well. So those are the general questions that you should be at least in general prepared for to answer about yourself. And we all love the question, tell me about yourself, right? It's very vague, but that's definitely a question that you probably will be asked. So brainstorm ideas about how you can answer that.
Okay, so these are some questions for the interviewer that you want to ask them when they ask you, do you have any questions? You can ask something like, what are the company's pillars and what values correlate with these company's pillars to kind of get an idea with what they value, make sure that you align with them in that way. How are workers cared for when sick? That's a really important question. Make sure that they will take care of you, you get paid time off and all of that stuff. What are the benefits of this job? How is paid time off coordinated to see kind of how they process that in the system, especially if like, you know, you're planning a trip soon or you have something coming up that you might need to take time off for. And it's always best to leave with an open-ended question, such as, can you give an example of a person who would be considered your best success? So give the interview a chance to answer that.
And I have actually one thing that I wanted to add. If this is something on your radar, you should also ask about how they coordinate like parental leave. So if you start a family, you should talk about how they coordinate that as well. So that should be incorporated with that as well.
And then just a few do's and don'ts for interview etiquette. You always want to dress appropriately, which I feel like we've covered a good amount. You always want to be polite and respect people's boundaries, use safe for work language, try not to curse, act politely and professionally. You always want to tell the truth, although it can be tempting to embellish the truth, make yourself seem better than you actually are. Whoever is hiring you will definitely do some background checks and make sure, and check your experience with your other former employers, or if something is revealed as a lie at a later time, that can definitely get you fired. So you want to avoid doing that. Do be memorable. So try to establish a rapport with the hiring managers, try to stick out, maybe find something in common with them through their LinkedIn or something that you guys kind of can share and talk about so that they will remember you. And then if you don't forget to research the company. And this is because lack of knowledge about a company is a really big red flag for hiring managers. So you want to walk into the interview knowing the company's history, their current clients and products, what services they offer, and maybe like number of employees, competitors, and things like that. And then don't be late. That's just plain rude. Interviewers are likely doing a few different interviews in one day, so this can throw off their whole schedule. If you're really late, they might even just be like, okay, you're not going to get the job. We don't have time to interview you today. And it can just show you in a really bad light. So don't do that. And then in addition, don't be negative about previous jobs or employers. Even if you have a really bad experience at a company or your last job, you always want to find something positive to say and show that you're enthusiastic and you don't want to talk badly about other jobs that you've had.
So, as I just mentioned before, people get really nervous during interviews, and there's also things you can do during the interview to manage your anxiety. So one thing that may be debatable to say is that you should be honest about your nerves, but you can spin this in a positive way by saying, I have to admit, I'm kind of nervous, but it's just because I'm so passionate about this job, and that just shows how dedicated I am to this position. And disclosing your nerves, it can kind of make you feel more relaxed, so you're not like feeling like you have to pretend like you're this calm person. And it can also make you feel more relatable, because some people might be really nervous just to be interviewing you. It might be their first time, or maybe they're just always nervous to do interviews. So framing that in a positive light can take off a lot of stress for both you and the interviewer as well. Also, slowing down can be really helpful if you just be aware of your breathing before you answer, like take a breath, stay present in the moment, and repeat the question. If you're ever feeling really anxious, you can repeat the question to give yourself more time to think. And you can also say, oh, I really like that question. Let me think about that, and show that you're taking it really seriously and you want to give a thorough answer. So you don't have to feel rushed to respond. There's really no rush. You also want to remember that you are evaluating the position as well to see if it's a good fit for your interests. You should already have done that, but you can continue to evaluate it during the interview as well. And this can kind of make you feel like the spotlight isn't all on you, which can ease your nerves. And you can also take notes to help you evaluate the position and keep track of what you're learning. And that can sort of ease your nerves as well, because you're not focused on yourself, you're focused on your notes a little bit. Also, the notes are great because you can refer back to those later on if you follow up with the interviewer to express your interest. You can refer to something from your conversation and show that you remember that and remind them of that interaction. And that can be really helpful as well.
And it looks good if you're taking notes.
Yes, it does.
Okay. Do you guys have any questions on that part? Yes.
Yeah, when you mentioned the question, tell me about yourself, like, and how it's so vague. The way I answer in my head is I want to clarify. I want to be like, okay, is there anything specific that you're asking? Like, what are you looking for or something like that? Do you guys view that as a negative or is that okay?
I think that's okay. I think that's smart, because if you say don't ask that question and then you start rambling about how you were like a track star in high school, they're gonna be like, okay, that doesn't matter to me. So I think that's a totally good way to take that question.
So for those on Zoom, I just want to clarify, Joseph was just suggesting that it's helpful to ask, like, are you guys looking for a specific answer about myself? That way, you can gauge like how vague do they want me to answer this? Like, how broad can I be?
I also know that like in certain like spheres of professionalism, they'll actually use like open-ended questions like that, not really caring about what the actual answer is, but more so caring about how you go about answering it. And so like they would care more about the fact that let's say like Joseph says, okay, which aspect of my life are you looking for? Or like, you know, so on and so forth, like something like that. They would more take, oh, so he likes clarifying, or oh, he likes knowing exactly what is happening, like more so than just like actually caring about the information that's potentially being shared.
And I think the point of that question is to intentionally figure out which parts of your life or yourself that you focus on the most, right? So if you said, if your answer to that question was like, tell you about yourself, you're like, okay, well, I'm a 20-something-year-old student from small town, small town, Northern California. I have X siblings and so like pay family is important, right? And like everything that you answer will inform them about who you are, like in a big picture way, not just on how you answer, how you think you are, you know what I mean? So if you feel like you want to be tailored professionally, I would say you can ask that, but also be okay with just saying, this is who I am, you know what I mean? So it's whatever you're comfortable with, honestly, but that's a great thing, I think.
I have a little bit of feedback to that, and I'm sorry, but I'm gonna make a suggestion of like the example. I would definitely not encourage to share your age. So when you're talking about yourself, don't share your age, because that's one of those pieces of information that the employer doesn't need to know about, and they can use it against you. So just want to make that correction. Like, probably don't share your age.
Right.
The other
slide.
sorry.
It's okay. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. The other piece is that I was going to say, like, in adding to that question about like answering generally, both as a person, like as a career advisor that I get to work with students with like preparing for interviews. And also I've chaired a couple of search committees. So I've gotten to be on the other end where I'm looking for something or I'm assessing the answers. I think that when you're answering a question that seems to be that you might be able to answer like in a general way, try to not keep it too general, because sometimes I feel that when we get very general answers, it ends up feeling more like a list of like, okay, these are the things that I have, and it lacks the depth of like, okay, so this is the thing that I want to focus on, and then let me give you some examples of that particular thing. So if you're discussing like a skill that you have, like not just listing like these are my strengths and weaknesses, but providing like an example. So always thinking of like, how can I provide substantial information or an example of a project or an example that helps the employer understand how I like apply this and how I'm successful in doing so. So that would just be my suggestion, that maybe when it is general, try to stick with something that you do want to focus on and not just listing, giving it a little further depth with providing examples.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for that.
I actually do have a question based on that, because I feel like the last time I did some interviews, I'm realizing I'm barely getting to that age where I have some work history that is a long time ago. And so I never am quite sure how far back I should mention examples of my work history. Like, is work that I did in high school not valid to bring up anymore? Or like, how do I navigate that?
Could you guys on Zoom hear the questions, by the way? Yeah, okay, so we don't have to repeat them. Let us know if you ever need us to clarify anything.
This might be a good question for Nora, because
Yeah.
I remember Steph talking about it, and I feel like she said that it's not great to list things in high school. They're not super relevant anymore. But Nora, what do you think?
Well, I would say that it depends. Like, you can bring it into the interview without necessarily saying like, I have experience of doing this in high school. You can more like generally bring it into like, if like in high school, you were like the president of a club and you have leadership experience, then maybe looking back over like the period of years that you have gained that experience. So maybe now counting like high school, you've had like 10 years of leadership experience, bulking it in that way and saying like, I have 10 years of experience that where I held leadership roles of like, you know, organizing meetings or whatever it was. So without having to say like, this is, you need to know, because they don't need to know that it was from high school. Just like in a resume, probably you wouldn't want to make that reference necessarily, but when you're interviewing, it's totally okay to do it. And you don't have to like necessarily highlight it as a high school experience. You could just highlight it as an experience generally. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
That actually helps me because I'm like 2 years out of high school. So I'm like, what do and I was in COVID while I was in college. So I'm like, I don't really have any other experience besides high school.
Yeah.
So that's really helpful for me. So thank you for that.
Yeah, so I have a job. Earlier, you guys said it was okay to ask about the benefits and like paid time off. But I have gone to interviews and asked that because I had like a general, like a really specific question about it. And I had been told that I was being a little too forward about that. So I was wondering, is there a good way to like gauge that? Like when is it like appropriate to ask?
So I don't know, this may be applicable, and Nora, you can correct me. Generally, if it's already listed in the job description and you could find it somewhere else, you don't need to ask that question. Like you shouldn't ask a question that you already know or are assumed to know beforehand. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah, so like if they have that in the job description, if they say, you know, full dental, full medical, right? That's already known, and that's why like, that's why it maybe like, that's how you can move around, like getting that question, answering that question, I think. Does that sound about right, Nora, to you? Oh.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's such a great feedback that you definitely, when you're asking your question, something that's different and shows like, you know, you're seeking to know more. And when it comes like, if it's like negotiating more, like you're trying to figure out what the salary is, or like you want to know like what benefits in that way, because you're trying to negotiate, it might be best to wait until you have an offer. And I would say like, you know, the questions that you can ask in the interview, like questions that would help you determine like if like more connected to culture, more connected to like the environment of like the company itself, like questions that are important for you in terms of if you're going to be happy there. Because the benefit piece, you can always reach out to HR or the recruiter to ask those questions independently. Like the more benefit related ones. And when it comes to like salary negotiation and those sort of things, those are definitely more appropriate once you've been given the offer. So if you're trying to negotiate any benefit, wait until you've been given an offer.
And that makes sense too, because it's kind of like, you know, you do your interview and then they're like, here's our offer. We will do this for you if you come work for us, right? That's when that information would be for them to do anyways. And that's also when you can say, nope, I feel like I'm worth more than that, so I'm gonna skip to the next opportunity. Thank you for your time, basically. You know what I mean? You can be okay with them presenting you with an offer, and you're like, I thank you for the opportunity. This was really a wonderful learning experience. I'm looking for something else. You know what I mean? That's when that information will be present. So, yeah.
All right, so we're gonna quickly go over after the interview, and then we'll go into the Q&A portion of it. So. Okay, so one thing I wanted to mention that it's really awesome if you write a thank you letter or email after the interview. A lot of hiring managers will look for this and will see how fast you, sorry, this chat distracted me, how fast that you send one in and things like that. So I put an example of here, just being like, hi, thank you for meeting with me today. It was a pleasure to learn about your team. I'm very excited about the opportunity and that sort of thing. And you can even say like, I look forward to blank, and it lists something that you would be doing if you were working for the company and something that adds value to the company. So you can do this just through email, or you can even drop off a handwritten letter if you want to go with the extra stuff.
So here's some things you can do after the interview so that you're not really stressed out, wondering while you're waiting for your answer, or if you do receive an answer that's not what you were hoping to receive, if you didn't land the position, then here's ways you can cope with stress or negative feelings associated with that experience. So you can try to think about what you can learn from the experience and think about what you would do differently. You can also work on expressing your emotions, talk about how you're feeling with someone you trust, so a friend or maybe an advisor or something like that. Or maybe you'd rather just write in your journal, write about your experience, or some people might express themselves emotionally through dancing or singing. However you do it, it's just good to not run away from those emotions, because if you express them, then you'll be able to deal with them better and they'll probably won't last as long. You can also work on the way you talk to yourself. So taking credit for your successes is really important, especially some people can be really hard on themselves. And that's not to say that you shouldn't be accountable for if you did make a mistake, or maybe you feel like you didn't prepare enough. It's not to say that you shouldn't be aware of that and consider how there's certain parts of it that might be because of a lack of preparation on your part, for example. But when you think about that, just remember that that's not who you are inherently. You're not forever going to be that person, and it's not based on something inherent about yourself. It's just in this situation, that's how you happen to be in that moment. So it's kind of the difference between thinking I am stupid versus I did something stupid in that moment. So yeah, don't blame yourself. Don't blame who you are inside, and do take credit for your achievements. Because some people might, if they succeed, they might say I was just lucky, but probably there are things you did to earn those achievements, and so you should be mindful of those. And you deserve to take credit for your successes. So, and here's sort of a diagram showing the two different ways that your thinking can lead to either positive or negative outcomes. So a stressful event happens, like maybe you didn't land the job, and so then you have to explain to yourself, why didn't I get the job? And so you could either say, I'm stupid, or you could say, I was unprepared because there was unusual pressures that day, and so I didn't have the chance to prepare like I would have otherwise. So if you say to yourself, I'm stupid, this is just who I am, I'm worthless, then that's going to change your expectations so that you just think it's hopeless, and you feel like there's nothing you can do to improve things in the future. So that will lead you to chronically feel negative feelings, feel depressed, and you won't be as motivated to try to change things because you don't think that there's anything you can do to change things. Compare that to a positive, helpful way of coping with things and thinking about things. If you think that it's just because of the situation, it's not due to your personality, then you might think your expectation would be that you'll just prepare better next time, for example. You'll put more time in, maybe you'll go get more advice from your advisor, things like that. And so that's going to lead to more, those negative feelings will be more temporary, and you're going to be engaging in more active, goal-driven behavior as a result of that. Do you have any questions about what to do after the interview? Or we can move on to Nora. Yeah.
Okay, so now we're gonna do a little Q&A with the experts. So we have some students that are gonna talk about their previous interviewing experience, get some feedback from Nora, and you guys can all ask her questions and we can go through some stuff. So Adrian, would you like to start?
So we're just gonna have everyone introduce themselves first, and then we'll do a Q&A. So can you come up here and just say who you are and what your recent interview experience was, and then your big takeaway from it. And then just to clarify, we'll also have Nora introduce yourself too.
Did you want to go first or?
No, you can go first.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Edgar Lopez. For those who don't know me, I had a recent interview experience here on campus for an on-campus internship. And my experience from that is that it wasn't actually a very professional interview. I'm not saying like it was like inappropriate or anything. I'm saying more it was, I went in thinking it was going to be professional, but it was more of a casual experience. However, I still took away from the fact that you never want to cross the line of informality. Going and staying professional is something that you definitely want to still do. Even if it is just taking a little leeway to get a little bit more informal, never cross that line. So.
Benny, would you like to introduce yourself now and talk about your recent experience with interviews?
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Ben. I'm a senior data analyst over at Kaiser Permanente. And before this position, I was a consulting research analyst over at, well, Blue Cross Blue Shield. And, you know, most recently, when I had my last interview, it was a little more informal for me in the sense that because I was already an expert in the field, well, I was already like an associate level in the field and I moved to the senior level, I was able to talk about what I wanted to do with the position. And I feel like that really set me apart because I didn't have like a general idea. I had like this is exactly what I want to do. And I think it'll benefit everyone this way. Sorry, I think I might have gone off track. What were we supposed to talk about?
That was great. Yeah.
Perfect.
Success, easy, win.
Thank you. And then we also have Rhiannon as well.
Hi, I'm Rhiannon. I'm a first-year graduate student in the academic research program here with a focus on neuroscience. I've done a lot of interviews. I've done a couple for grad schools, but mostly for a lot of jobs, like small part-time jobs that could, turn into a career. I've done a couple interviews at Barnes even, and I think the one takeaway I think I have from every interview is that you have to be confident in yourself and your abilities, and you have to have a personality. Because even if you're perfect for the job on paper, if you're really boring or you have really like hyper structured answers or anything like that, then they won't hire you. Or if you're not confident in yourself, then they're going to think, oh, maybe they can't really do this or they can't work in this field because they're not confident enough in their abilities, and they might not hire you then. So you have to be professional still, but you have to be able to say, yes, I can do this and this and this, and make them remember that you're a person with a personality and things like that, which I think was mentioned a little bit earlier too.
Thank you. And then we can have Sam and then Nora introduce, and then we'll do Q&A for a bit, and then the mock panel.
Hi, my name's Sam. I'm going to be a school psychology graduate student at the College of St. Rose in Albany, New York in the fall. I just finished doing all of my battery of interviews for graduate school. So my information, if you want to know it, is going to be mostly geared towards interviewing for graduate programs because that's the most recent for me. If you are curious about the main styles of questions that were asked, the top three really were related to your relative uniqueness, which again, we celebrate that, of course, in the presentation that we just saw. Looking for your career goals, your motivation, potentially research ideas if you're going for any kind of master's or doctoral study, your learning, your goals, ideals related to diversification, decolonization, and anti-racist progress that you think is really essential was very important in my experience with interviews. But really, ultimately, the thing that to remember is that you're taking a seat at the institution for many, many years, and the faculty really want to know that you're a passionate, intelligent, compassionate, empathetic, and really just a potential colleague. One of the things that I really, really worried about a lot was GPA. I have a 3.21, so as long as you hit the 3.0 cutoff, you can do this. And also, I think using cognitive biases to your advantage is very important too, and answering first or answering last, because we know that the primacy and recency effects really do matter in being memorable to your interviewers.
I'm Nora Montoya, and let's see, I'm a career advisor here in Cal Poly Humboldt. So my experience with interviewing, like first was very, 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 very raw. Like I am a first generation high school and college graduate, and I had no like sense of anything, like what I could do with a career, resume, and like just the whole application process. And that totally translated to interviewing as well. Like the very first interview that I had for a job that I enjoyed. So my background is in psychology, and most of my work has been in human services. And I was applying for a job in doing case management, and I was like so passionate about that job. I was like, they asked me a question about if how would I encourage a single mother to, understand the value of employment for their children. It was applying for a welfare to work case management role. And I started crying, like, because I was like so excited about the job. And I'm like, it touched my heart because I was like, it made me think about my mom. And so I have like messed up interviews seriously, like really badly. And then just over time, the practice has definitely helped. My best interview has been the one for this job. And I think that it really came from a lot of practice and a lot of like what everybody already mentioned. I think that, what Rhiannon mentioned, I felt really was the reason why I connected so well with the team, that the piece of being able to just be myself and being able to express my passion and being able to not take it too seriously, where I was like, if I don't get this job, it's going to be the end of the world and I'm going to be so stressed. I was just like, I'm coming in and I'm having a conversation about something that I really am excited about and I enjoy with people that have that same passion. And so, being able to see it in that way and not putting the stress of like, even though I really wanted to leave my job at that time, and I was like, I hope this works out, I really changed my frame of mind. And it really worked out really well. I'm an introvert. I don't like doing presentations. I don't really like being in front of big crowds, but being able to just be myself and focus on what I have to bring, and the passion of like whatever you're discussing and being yourself, I think it goes a long way. So I just really connect with what Rhiannon mentioned in that regards.
Thank you all. Lovely.
Before we move on really quick, Ben mentioned something in the chat that I thought was kind of important. They said that our hiring climate has been rapidly shifting in the direction of employees as a result of COVID. They've seen more and more positions offering larger salaries and gigantic sign-on bonuses. And there are plenty of articles recently on how this next generation will really pivot things like work-life balance in a beneficial way. So I just thought that was kind of important.
Yeah, I think I saw in the previous slides, there was a little focus on maybe it felt sort of like the stress before interview or, starting your career. I really think that we should highlight that career development at this stage is really, really cool for people who are just starting it, because we're seeing a lot more entry and associate level positions just be completely open. The churn rate right now is for the employees, so they can make, demands, if you will, and they can talk about benefits compared to pre-COVID times where it was still kind of bottom heavy. So congratulations, everyone. You're in a great place.
Thank you. That's very comforting to hear. Okay, but there's a question in the chat. I have a master's in nursing and I'm an FNP, but I'm looking to apply to grad school in psychology. I'm trying to navigate the change. Any recommendations for people who are transitioning or changing professions?
Well, first of all, Michelle, I want to say that it is very, very, very normal for us to transition careers. Like, you know, it's because sometimes it might feel a little scary and you're like, why am I doing this? Am I making the right choice? And, you know, it really, it's very natural. And a lot of times there is definitely a lot of transferability between the skills of what you have done in the past and what you're doing in the future. And I think that Benny brought up a really, really important point. Like, what aspect of psychology do you want to go into? And is there a connection that you can tie into like what you did with nursing? So like if it's connected to like, for example, like clinical psychology or like something in the realm, like being able to like see the transferability. And another thing is that when you apply to grad school, I think that the people that review the applications get excited to see somebody that doesn't fit the normal, like that is a background that's a little slightly different, and that because that gives you a unique angle on the way that you're going to do the work. And that's a very, very interesting and selling point, because you can bring innovation, you can bring creativity, you can enhance. It's a big area of asset. I'd be very interested in hearing what anybody else has to say, because this is a question that we get all the time with students. So I would want to hear what the rest of the panelists want to share too.
I can't speak on any experience with changing careers, but I do know because I am focusing in neuroscience, and I know you mentioned that you're interested in that. It's having previous experience, especially with people in such a hands-on profession like nursing. It's really valuable because in neuroscience, we don't often get a lot of hands-on experience with people, mostly because a lot of it is so detailed into all like the nitty-gritty aspects of the brain that we can't do that with people. So being able to have that experience is really unique and really important in neuroscience. So I think that would definitely help a lot if that's something you wanted to go into.
Also, not speaking from any experience, but I'm taking a class, health psychology with Stephanie Suter. And there's been tons of movements in recent years for medical schools to start talking about psychology in a more inclusive way, and also like including communication skills and all of that. So going from a medical thing into psychology will have the same kind of results as going from psychology to medical, right? Because you can transfer those skills, and it's really important to bring all aspects of that. So I think it's going to be awesome, and you'll find the overlap pretty easily.
Sam, yeah, go ahead.
So that was actually really what I wanted to get at. I'm a career changer too, Michelle. I was a medical assistant for 10 years. So really the thing that I know that you're so good at that maybe you're not thinking about right now is your incredible ability to already deal with patients on the psychological front, because that's most of your job. I'm very much certain of that, reaching patients at that human level. And I'm certain that you will fit right in. Really, really, I do.
Definitely. Do any of you guys have any questions for Nora?
I would just like want to add like to Michelle, and also to like any other student that has like, you know, unique circumstances, because we all have, you know, like our unique path, that, you know, there is so much support out here, so you don't have to do this alone and navigate it alone. You know, like Michelle, your statement about like struggling with it, you know, like the connection that you made with Rhiannon and her being able to explain to you a little bit of like from her perspective, her being in the field, what the benefits of your career or your perspective, your own perspective are, like, you know, using the resources that you have, like doing some informational interviewing to understand the career that you want to go into. Like, you know, it could be with Rhiannon or somebody else that is doing it, so you can understand like, okay, these are some direct connections where like the skills, the experience that I have, like have some direct connection. And you could do it like with your network. It's so expansive, you know. And I don't really like the word network. I like more like the word like support system. Your support system is huge. You know, we have like, you know, also you have the career advising center. You have a career advisor that's assigned to you that can help you look at ways to strategize and think of like, okay, like where can I go look for a job description for this job? What's my current experience and how are those connected to this? Like, so when you're applying for either a job or for grad school, you see what we already know, that you are super prepared, that you have it in you, you have the skills already, and you feel more confident with your next steps.
Thank you, Nora. Okay. Yes, Evan.
This question is mostly aimed at Sam.
Yeah.
Yeah. Damn, my
I'm
bad.
just saying. Make sure they can hear you.
So you talked about having to interview recently for grad programs. Before COVID, I know that those schools would possibly fly you out to their campus to interview you, to kind of check it out. Kind of still during COVID right now, during your recent interviews, did they get to fly you out, or were they just like, no, that's off the Zoom or phone?
Yeah, it was all Zoom. I was kind of, I mean, maybe it was my big dreams of grandeur that, oh, these PhD programs, maybe they'll fly me out, but no, there were too many candidates, and I would imagine that they really their COVID protocols were too strict for any of that to occur. I think that is being lifted soon. So, I mean, if all goes well, I think that maybe you might have a different experience.
I do have another part to that, second part to that question. After the interviews, did they hint or kind of give you a decision of just like, you know what, we like you and we want you to, we'll give you some sort of acceptance to the program?
The only ones that really kind of wore their decision on their sleeve were the school I'm going to. I was accepted to 5 other programs and I'm waitlisted at a 6th, but they really kept that information close to the chest. Only one of them was really like, they called me right after. It was
Yeah, thank you. Congrats again.
Yeah, congrats, Sam. That's awesome. Do we have any more questions before we do? We have like 20 minutes left for just like some practice questions and things like that. But just want to make sure we're all good.
Oh, I have a question that I'm curious, like if anybody's gotten, and also like what their take on it is, because this one is kind of a little newer for me. The like question that is like the kind of like hits you like, where is this coming from? Like my husband applied for a job like a couple of years ago, and they asked him like, tell us a joke. Or they might tell you like, you know, can you describe, if you were an animal, can you describe what animal you are? Like, so like, has anybody had any of those questions? And then like, how did you like kind of respond to that?
I mean, not in a professional sense, but I've been asked that in theater, in theater things.
Yeah, like I've noticed like a lot of in new interviews, or like more recently, like that's starting to be a practice to just kind of see like reaction, and how like you're able to think on your like feet. Benny, I saw you like kind of nodding. Have you ever experienced or like seen that?
Yeah, actually, I do that sometimes when we're interviewing on a panel. We're not really trying to like gotcha. We're just trying to test like comfortability and fit, because our data team, we have a lot of people who the fit's really important because we need to know that people are good at collaboration and working with other people, because we're super closely intertwined. We're basically talking every single day. So what I've sort of interpreted those questions is just, can you be relaxed in this situation that's already kind of tense?
That's really good insight, because I would probably panic, but I shouldn't.
I mean, yeah, during the interviews, I'm like constantly eating and like drinking soda. So it's not like super serious all the time.
Yeah.
I do want to give, like, I guess, some voice on that. I've never been asked that personally. I probably would panic too, because I'm not funny, like, on the spot. But the general thing is that I guess I would hope, and for future knowledge of going into other interviews, is that similar, like I said, professionalism is an important thing, but similar how somebody mentioned before, is that you're also a person, you're like, you have to have a little bit of personality to yourself. So I think even if how do I put it? If somebody were to ask me that question and I would fail, at least I would be comfortable enough to understand that, like, hey, at least I showed I have a little bit of personality. And, even if I didn't do so good right there, it doesn't take away from the fact that, you are somebody who's a bit of a character in your own sense. You make yourself a little bit more memorable in that aspect. So it wouldn't be the end of the world, I think. I would hope so, if you can't answer a knock-knock joke or something like that. So, yeah.
I wanted to say that I was asked what kind of superpower I'd like to have. But more than that, I want to just make sure this gets out very quickly. If you do decide to read research that is done by faculty before you go to a grad school interview, and you start talking about it, make sure that you can answer questions about it.
Yeah, definitely.
Just that little aside, know it, or don't talk about it at all.
Yeah, for
Just
sure.
read the abstract.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
Reads one thing. That's it.
Yeah.
I just have a quick question about resume help. So if we needed help on like forming a resume and any questions about it, would we go to Nora or like
Yeah. You can make an appointment with them and just go into there and they can help you. You can share it with them and they can give you a lot of great tips. So yeah.
Yes. What is your major?
Psychology.
Psychology. Oh, okay. So right now the psychology caseload. So we generally have like a career advisor for each school. But right now we're in the process of hiring for the College of Professional Studies, and the main person for CNRS is on maternity leave. So that means that we're all wearing various hats. So I am, myself, I believe Cheryl Johnson and Kelly Fortner are also helping with the College of Professional Studies. So you're welcome to schedule an appointment with either of the three of us. I'll provide my contact information to help like connect you to the center if you'd like. I'll put it in the chat for all of you.
You can also talk to major-based grant mentors, which are peer mentors. And then you can also talk to your own academic advisor as well. They're gonna have funding and time on that as well.
And thank you for like mentioning that. And also like it is very helpful to connect with like professors, with professionals or individuals that are interested or that are already practicing in your field, because they can understand like the terminology, like so resumes can be different depending on what career you're going into. So getting feedback from like, individuals that are already in the field can be super helpful. So you're going to notice that depending on who you give the resume for review, you're going to get different feedback, which doesn't necessarily mean that one way or another is wrong. We just have different perspectives on it. So just keep that in mind, that ultimately it's up to you how you want to organize it. Like the key pieces that I always like say about resume development is just making sure that it is easy, that you're guiding the story of your resume to the reader, and the reader doesn't have to try and analyze and figure out what your story is. So that comes with really understanding the job description well. So spending that initial time, like reading the job description, specifically focusing on the minimum qualifications first and the preferred qualifications, and making sure that those are very clearly, very easy to identify, because the first level of review is determining that. Does the person meet the minimum qualifications? So, you know, how you organize that is up to you. There's not necessarily a wrong way of doing it, as long as it's easy and concise. So that would just be my suggestion, that, you know, like keeping it relevant. So sometimes that might mean with like psychology resumes that those tend to be 2 pages rather than the rule of 1 page. As long as it's relevant and you've kept it as concise as possible, then you've done your due diligence. But yeah, definitely use all of your resources.
I really appreciate what Nora said, and then I also want to add on to it. So for our roles as data scientists and analysts, there's also other websites that you can use that are pretty strong. So I definitely go through people's LinkedIn pages. And if they are sort of coding types, I also go through their GitHub pages. If they do some sort of like visualization, I'll go through their Tableau pages. So it's a pretty aggressive background check, but it's, you know, absolutely necessary. So get a LinkedIn is what I'm trying to say. It's like free.
Yeah, and Ben also put in the chat that sometimes he just straight up emailed recruiters at companies that he wanted to work at and asked them to look over their resume and CV and stuff. So that's also definitely an option. Yes, Jacob.
On that same note, I did want to make a comment from my own learned experience. This is more so with those who are interested in like academia or research in general. But on the line of the CV, start it before you think you need to start it.
Yeah.
Because I did not, and then it was really tricky to like retroactively go backwards and think of all of the things that, yeah, and like Sam said, keep it updated as well. But yeah, go back and just like fill everything in. Because I mean, I've been in school for 5 years now, and there were things that I needed to fill in since year 1, and it was not easy to do. So if you have any inclination that you might be interested in academia and know that you might need a CV as opposed to a typical resume, start that, even if it's just like a bare bones framework. Like look at examples of CVs, fill out the basics, and get something on there so that you have something to do what Sam referenced and just like fill it in as you're going. Because trust me, it's not easy to go backwards.
Yeah. And you can also, something that Steph taught us was to like keep your like file, your Microsoft Word file in the very middle of your computer screen so that you see it every day. And then you're like, oh, I need to add something to my CV. And you can just do it super quick. And Nora also mentioned, don't forget the skills, experience you gain through coursework. I have an academic projects section. I love how Polly has applied perspective, which includes presentation, research papers, mock activities. Like you can even put this on your CV that you attended a pro dev thing and you got your participant in a mock panel, which we're gonna start in a second, I promise. And like we're gonna put on here that we led this. So like things like that you might not even think you could go on your CV, like can definitely apply. So yeah. Okay, so we're just gonna go through, Adrian, you can come over here because your answer is very easy. We're just gonna go through a few like example questions and hear from y'all and from us how you might answer some interview questions. So for example, before Adrian gives his answer, do one of you guys want to say how you became interested in the particular field that you're in, if you were asked this in an interview?
So my personal experience was I went into community college first, knowing that there was some uncertainty around my future and a career choice, because obviously it is a lot to ask teenagers what they want to do for the rest of their life. And there was a lot of pressure put on me to know exactly what I wanted to do. And so I decided to go to a community college. I started as a nursing major, actually, and I was a nursing major for about a year or year and a half. And then I changed my major, not to psychology yet. I changed to bio with a pre-med emphasis. Very quickly after taking like Chem 3 and like Math 12 or something, realized that that was not the spot for me. But I knew, obviously, as most of you can probably see, there was a trend in my interest. It was people. And I was very lucky that I made connections with one of my lecturers. And this is another reason why I really appreciated going to community college, because I had the opportunity to take non-major focused electives. And this was in one of those classes. And so my lecturer showed me, it was a human sexuality class. It wasn't even a psychology class, but towards the end of the semester, she and I had communicated a couple of times. She came up to me and knew like my uncertainty with stuff. And she was like, hey, have you like ever thought of psychology? And, everything happened after that. But yeah, it was just one of those moments where everything kind of clicked together, but it was because I had allowed myself the opportunity to like take that time that was needed, instead of, forcing myself into a 4-year degree at a prestigious university that would have cost me way too much money. And then kind of felt stuck in that way because I had made that investment. So yeah, that's kind of how I fell into psychology, and then everything kind of came out of that from there.
Thank you. Adrian, do you want to talk about how you became interested in play?
Yeah, and go a little off of this too.
Yeah.
But similar to Jacob here is that I also started from a community college, and I eventually transferred here. But similarly, I went from all over the end of the spectrum in the sense of I wanted to be like from a archaeological anthropologist to the food industry to eventually game design. Luckily, all of those were like electives or courses that didn't really take too much away, like divert me and like graduating on time, except for game design didn't transfer well to psychology. But ultimately, the main point for that was that I definitely wanted to get into a field that I could either help people or understand people better. And generally, that's why I made the switch. However, finding myself now as a graduate student studying under Dr. Gaffney, which is social psychology. She's the one who formally introduced me to that field or that line of research, where I would also pick up on a similar theme within psychology, that most of the things that I found interesting was what made people kind of tick regarding groups and other people. Not so much, the cognitive sense or anything like that, but more the social aspect. And that's basically why it kind of drove me a little further into that. Just understanding why we do the things that we do in regards to like other people and how we ourselves influence them, and vice versa. Basically kind of drew me into that. But essentially, just trying to understand people in that conceptual, perspective. That's why I got into this kind of field.
And your thesis is related to gaming, which is super
Yeah,
cool.
so I didn't, that kind of didn't go to waste entirely. So I still managed to tie in gaming, which is part of my social identity, to my line of work as well. So.
Nice plug.
Okay, so we only have a few minutes left, but there was one question that Ben actually had a really good answer for. So if I'm going to put you on the spot if you want to answer it, or I can read the answer that you wrote in our Google Doc. But what are your personal strengths and weaknesses?
Let's see. What I said was, and I'm definitely not stalling for time while I open up my emails. Here we go. So I said, Okay, so this is just from my own interpretation of what is your strengths and weaknesses. These questions aren't really designed for you to just, spout out what you're good at and what you're not good at. They're really talking about how you can think about a question sort of like on your feet. So for a lot of people, or when I say on your feet, it also talks about like that development of professionalism and, maturity. So like, let's just play through this scenario really quickly. If I were to I'm the interviewer and I give a really generic question, like what's your strength and what's your weakness? The first response might be something like, oh, I'm really good at like collaborating with my team and I'm really good at things in Excel. And then the weakness might be like, oh, I'm not that good at showing up on time. Both those answers suck. And the reason why I say that is because they're not really providing any greater detail. You're sort of just playing like this verbal game with people. A really good way to approach both these questions at the same time is to talk about two dichotomous and lateral questions. So it might be like, oh, I'm really good at approaching problems from a high level perspective, and I'm getting better at approaching them from a low level perspective. And so what's happening there is I'm actually not talking about what I'm really, great or weak at. I'm just sort of talking about my own like professional development for a soft skill, not a hard skill like Excel or replying at 5 a.m. So what I'm really trying to say is that we want to provide, or when those questions are asked, you're really trying to give the interviewer an idea about like long-term stability. Like, I can do this, I'm capable of growth, and I'm capable of like, doing my job, which is the most important thing. Let's be honest, we're all here for cash, get more cash, give good responses.
Thank you, Ben. That was a very good answer. All right, so it's 6:30, so we can let you guys go, but we didn't get to get through too much of the mock panel questions. We do have a Google Doc going of a lot of our example responses. So if any of you guys want us to share it with you, just come up and type your email in, because that can have a lot of really good resources. And Nora also dropped her information in the chat. And yeah, if any of you guys on Zoom want that Google Doc, just drop your email in the chat. And yeah, just want to thank you guys all so much for coming and participating. And thank you, Nora, for being here. We really appreciate all of your help.
Yeah, thank you so much for like putting this great event. I mean, I took some great notes from what everybody shared. Thank you for the collaboration, and it was a really great experience working with all of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Also, just a couple announcements. We're going to have another professional development seminar on April 25th. So mark your calendar, 3 p.m. We're going to cover how to navigate academic conferences and network and work on effective poster designs for academic posters. And we also have a site talk coming up next week on Wednesday at 4 p.m. about suicidal behavior trends in sexual minority youth. So also follow us on Instagram, please. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
Cool, thank you. Yes.
No.
No.